Let's take a minute to look at the draft settings. Those are located in the lower right corner of the screen. But before we actually get to the settings, I want to take a look at the fonts. You can tap on this button to access font information. You can see I've got it using the system font, but if I'd like, I can choose a different one. Drafts can provide highlighting for common markdown syntax or for hashtags and @ mentions in social media. You can also change the background look of the screen. Drafts also has an automatic dark mode that can be set pursuant to the amount of brightness in the room. It's kind of nice to have drafts open in dark mode when you're in a dark room or outside at night. Now let's look at the settings. You can access those with the settings icon in the lower right corner of the screen. Starting at the top, Drafts supports Text Expander Snippets. Text Expander is a separate application that allows you to save snippets of text that are triggered by short phrases. Drafts both will expand Text Expander shortcuts when you're typing, and it also allows you to expand shortcuts from within actions. This next setting about when to create a new draft is really helpful. One of the things I love about drafts is when I open it, it's always got a blank screen and ready for me to start typing a new draft. But if you just leave the app for a few seconds to check some information, you don't necessarily want it to come back to a new draft, but maybe just pick up where you left off. You can set that timer to 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes, or never. I keep mine at 1 minute. Show inbox count as a badge is another one that I really like. I keep that turned on. That way, if I have any drafts in my inbox that I haven't acted upon, it gives me a badge, and since the badges make me a little crazy, I go in and take care of them. You also have the ability to hide the toolbar while editing a draft, and you can hide the extended keyboard, though I wouldn't recommend that because that extended keyboard is really useful. You can also control whether or not drafts play sounds. Importing reminders allows you to work with existing reminders and add text to drafts through Siri. I cover that in the reminders screencast. Scrolling down, there's some additional settings. Setting the default behavior after an action success can determine where a lot of your drafts go. For instance, if you select do nothing and they're in your inbox, they'll stay in your inbox. Alternatively, you can archive or trash them. The default setting is archive, and that's where I like to keep it. If you're using any third-party services, you can configure those accounts right in the draft settings. We've done several of these as we've gone through the screencast about how to use drafts with Dropbox and Evernote. This is also the place where you can set the iOS permissions for drafts. Drafts will sync your data by default over iCloud. This is really useful, especially if you have both an iPad and an iPhone. That way, all the drafts you've recorded on your iPhone will show up on your iPad and vice versa. Even if you don't have multiple devices, syncing in iCloud is still a good idea because it gives you a way to safely back up your drafts and actions. You can access those settings with this button. Also, if you'd like, you can reset that. In an earlier screencast, I showed you how to capture text from the web and bring it into drafts. By default, when it does so, it will bring in the title of the web post, the URL, and the selection. You can change that, however, with this setting. There's also a Today View widget that's covered in a separate screencast. In the settings screen, you can choose how many recent drafts are displayed in that Today View. Now I'm going to scroll down a bit more. There are several different flavors of Markdown, and there's a whole separate screencast here on using Markdown in drafts. With this setting, you can decide which version of Markdown drafts uses. As we get closer to the bottom, there's some more utilities for drafts. For instance, you can back up and restore actions and keyboards. You can also export your drafts and actions. There's also settings concerning URL security. And finally, if you have any questions about drafts, there's a series of links at the bottom that can get you help documentation, send feedback, get on the mailing list, or even rate the application. And if you're enjoying using drafts, please give it a good rating. It really helps the developer find new customers. Once I'm done, I'll just tap the Done button in the upper left corner, and I'm ready to get back to work in drafts.